Welcome to the Frontlines of Leadership podcast, where my guests tell stories and share principles to inspire the rising generation of leaders. In today's episode, I'm excited to welcome Amy Folan to the Frontlines of Leadership podcast. Amy is in her 6th year as Director of Athletics at Central Michigan University, a role she was appointed to in October 2020. Under her leadership, CMU Athletics has reached new heights, including its best ever fundraising year in 2024 through 25, raising over $10 million and launching the department's largest ever campaign, Maroon and Gold Bold, with a $25 million goal. Since her arrival, Amy has hired 10 coaches, launched a men's golf program, secured a $5 million healthcare partnership with My Michigan Health, and overseen MAC championships in gymnastics, wrestling, lacrosse, and more. On the academic side, CMU student athletes have maintained a department GPA of 3.0 or better for 53 consecutive semesters. Nationally, Amy serves on the NCAA Division I Women's Basketball Committee and the Lead One Association Board of Directors. Before coming to Central Michigan, she spent 17 years at the University of Texas, most recently as Executive Senior Associate Athletics Director, overseeing the Longhorn Foundation, where she led 6 of the most successful fundraising years in the foundation's history. Amy holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Connecticut, where she was a 4-year leader in women's soccer and a master's degree in sport management from the University of Georgia. Amy, welcome to the Frontlines of Leadership podcast.
Hi, Amy. Thank you so much for being willing to come on the podcast. I'm excited to get to know you and for our listeners to hear your story today.
Thanks for having me, Jackson. It's an honor, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we'll just jump into the first question. I'm as I've looked at your career, both as a soccer player yourself at UConn, and then as you've gone through the University of Georgia, Texas, and we'll get into all this, and now at Central Michigan as the athletic director. Who is someone throughout your career that you've watched and who had a great impact on you as a leader? And what were the attributes that they possessed that made their leadership stand out to you and made them an example to you of great leadership?
Well, I've been really, really fortunate. You mentioned I've been a lot of great places. And so I actually have 3 that I'm going to
Okay.
share. And it's not going to be long, but I know that everything's about people. And so I've been lucky to be around great leaders. And one is Noreen Morris. I always give her credit because she was the first. So when I was a student athlete at University of Connecticut, there was an Amy Schwartz from Portland, Oregon, and Amy Folan from Portland, Maine. So opposite areas of the country, there were 2 of us. And she came up and found me and she said, "Hi, I'm Noreen. I just want to welcome you to UConn." And, Noreen's probably not, she's like 5 years older than me. But you just made me feel at home. So it was like an easy lesson for when everybody's new and you're somewhere where we all go through that. But she was just kind and she was genuine and she came over. So it was even the small things. I think leadership, we underestimate that those small moments have a big impact. And I give her a lot of credit to this day. And I just saw her at the Final Four and she laughed because I did go to her and say, "Hey, I thought I want to do sports broadcasting." She was helping kind of mentor me. And then I said, "I think I want to do what you do." And she said, "No, you don't." And we laughed to this day. I was like, "I should have listened to you." And she's like, "No." But I mean, just truly fortunate to have somebody so genuine and caring. And it's not always the big speeches or accepting the trophies. Like, I think a lot of what's important is behind the scenes and the small things.
Yeah.
Another person is DeLoss Dodds. So that's a name. He was the AD at Texas for I think 32 years. It was a long, long run. And some of the things from him is same thing as not accepting the trophies. He is very genuine. When he was interviewing me, he actually stopped the interview to pick up a call from his grandson and he talked to him and then he got back on the phone. And so I think just his priority of family and such a demanding, crazy business that really stood out to me. I'd never seen anybody in a professional setting do it. And at first I wasn't sure quite what I thought about it, but I was 28 and I was like, he's successful. So it kind of gave me permission to have family and be important. So kind of through example.
Mm-hmm.
There was another time that we were going, I think, to a track meet or a soccer game. I remember where the stadium was at and both are played in there. And he didn't have his parking pass. Somebody borrowed it in his family and he didn't have it. And the woman's like, "I can't let you park here, sir." And he's like, "Okay, I appreciate it." He's doing his job. Regardless that he was AD at Texas at that time for 25 years, he never pulled rank or was rude or discourteous. He just always was genuine in himself. So again, a lot of people see the awards, the accolades. And the one thing he always taught me is I would try to study. I wanted to be an AD after getting with Noreen and knowing I wanted to do this. And he'd say, "Well, when you're just going to be yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And so I do think that is true. And why I'm giving examples of 3 different people is I've been through a lot of great leaders that are all very different. And I think one of the key successes is being yourself. So the last one I'll give is Chris Del Conte, who's the current AD at Texas. And similar, he's accepted a lot of awards on behalf of Texas, has set tremendous records. But one of his favorite sayings is if you got one finger pointing away, there's three back at you.
Yep.
And I think one of the things that he always does is he's always great at taking the blame publicly, and he'll find it, you'll have close the ranks and talk after and get it better. But anytime there's something public going wrong, he's really good at being the leader that takes it on his shoulders and wears it. And it's the authenticity, I think, from all of them. So I guess my mom always said it's actions, not words. And so I think one of the things great leaders, they're great with words. They're obviously great speakers. Noreen's a commissioner of a conference. But I think people that are truly successful, like people can see through if it's not genuine, it's not there. So I've been truly fortunate. I have many more, but those are three that, that to me throughout my career have been consistent and have had a big impact.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned three by name, but then your fourth is your mom. You mentioned your mom a little bit. So shout out to moms out there.
Yeah.
They're always great leaders.
They are.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing those three. I think it's amazing. I love asking this question on the podcast. That's always the first question I ask because it makes us look back, even though, I mean, you have a great career yourself now as the head at Central Michigan and looking back through Texas and all the other ones I mentioned. And you're able to look back and reflect on the people that helped you get to where you are. So I love that question and something I want to touch on, and maybe you could help dive into a little bit more. One of the first words you mentioned when you mentioned Noreen, and then as through the next two as well, is the importance of relationships. Maybe you could dive in a little bit more of why you feel relationships are so important in leadership, both being led and then also when you are, in the opportunity, when you have the opportunity to lead others, why those relationships are so critical.
I mean, one of the things I'll also say is always about people, and Del Conte in a different way, but it is. I have some stories I probably can't tell, but like he knew these people, and I was like, how do you know them? And honestly, sometimes I start laughing, like he went back to college and he might have been socializing with some people. So, somebody, and then I would be in the car and he was at Washington State and all these people call him like, oh my God, like all the people now, it's like the epicenter of college athletics now, like back in the day, like Noreen would say this too. She said, when you were a student athlete, like who would have known like where we were going? So,
right.
I mean, people truly is what it's about. And DeLoss would always say the best part of his job was people and the worst part of the job was people, but everything truly is about relationships. And I think how you treat people on any given day, I say how you treat anyone, it's how you treat everyone is true. And, I think it's just being authentic and genuine and consistent yourself. And not everybody can do that, right? Like it doesn't always show up in the right way, but I think over time it does play out. I mean, I've been fortunate, like Mac Brown, Rick Barnes, Shaka Smart, like again, when you're at great places, like these brands, the one common theme is people. And cream rises to the top and you find consistent people and just being around great leaders and have the opportunity to study. I mean, like all coaches are leaders of their units, areas, right? So kind of in the business of people and leadership. And so just really fortunate to see different success looks differently, but I think the same thing is people are usually pretty genuine. And that's how they get long-term success. If they're not, it just doesn't work. They all have different styles. And some of those people I mentioned are very different, but some of them still very successful in the same role. And so I think what's cool is just everybody finds their own way to be authentic and genuine and to leadership is getting results, right? But everybody does that a little differently. I think if you're not doing it in your own way, it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah. And I think, even just us being on this podcast together came through a relationship, through a connection that we both had through Bird Baggett, of course. And I think it's so true. As I've interviewed more and more leaders from the military, the highest ranks of the military, to business, to now athletics, it always has come back to relationships and the importance of people. And I think I'm reading a book right now. It's called Trust and Inspire by Stephen Covey. It's a leadership book. And he talks about the balance of performance versus, relationships with people. And both of them are very important. Like if you can't perform, it's hard for people to trust you. Like and if you can't ultimately get the results that are needed, but you have to do it in the right way. And you have to have that moral authority through relationships and people being able to trust you. So there's definitely that balance, but it always comes back to the ability for a leader to be trusted and then also to trust his people or his or her people to delegate to them as well. So the trust has to go both ways, but ultimately I think it always comes down to relationships and the people involved. So thank you for sharing that. And you may have already answered this the second question that I want to ask you, as we've talked about people and relationships. But I ultimately, through your career, learning from these leaders, and now with your opportunities to lead, what is your personal leadership philosophy? Like if someone was to come to you and say, like, what do you stand for? How do you lead? And I'm sure you've touched on it a little bit with the relationship part, but like if someone was just come say, what do you stand for as a leader? What's your personal philosophy? What would you say to them?
Well, I had the benefit of getting this really codified, and I want to say this was around like 2008. It was True Growth Academy, and
Yeah.
Bert Baggett is a former track runner at Texas, and he came in. DeLoss wanted to send me down because we actually use this for the whole department. So he wanted me to go look. We were looking at succession plan, and we knew DeLoss was towards the end of his career, so we wanted to build things up for business continuity and look at different leadership development and a business continuity plan. And then Lawson Magruder, who was Bird's partner, were putting on this True Growth Academy. And so one of the benefits, I've been to a lot of leadership things, was defining it. And for myself, like my definition is to be my best, serve others, and pass it on. And the values in this order are integrity, family, excellence, legacy, and continuous learning. And that has been the same for me since 2008. So I think I benefited from that program. I'd never got that specific, and
Mhm.
having to be that specific over a span of time, I think gives me comfort. I don't have to really think about it. Like those things kind of just really are so ingrained. But since you asked this, I don't talk about it as often, as I think it's just working there in my mind. And when everybody asks, it's something I've had since I'm getting old now. It's almost coming on 20 years.
No, that's awesome. And how has not everyone has had, that opportunity. I think it's so important to really nail down like what do you stand for? What are your values, your leadership values? And you mentioned some integrity, family, continuous learning. How has that supported you as a leader in times? I I I guess where this question comes from, I feel like the people that make oftentimes the greatest decisions have their values and they have decisions made before the opportunity even arises. Like if one of your values is integrity, when someone comes to you in any form and whatever they're asking you to do or to accept is not from a standpoint of integrity, you already have made that choice up. You're not going to make that choice. And that's just one example, but how has having these concrete written down since 2008 benefited you in your roles as a leader?
I think it just helps when I have a new president or new boss, members. When we get into situations, I'll just say, like, look, here's who I am and here's how I'm going to look at this. So if it doesn't align with where you are, like, it may not be right, but I'm going to pick integrity over money or winning. Like, it's just the way that I'm wired. So if that's not what your values are, where you're aligned, or you want this decision to be, just know that that's how I'm looking at it. And I think it just gives you a sense of confidence, right? Like at the end of the day, especially in any AD chair, you get to make tough decisions. It's not always going to be the right decision, but if you know what you care about and what you value at the end of the day, then if it doesn't work, at least you did it, with clarity and consistency, and, just do your best and figure it out from there.
Yeah, I like that. And you brought up something. I love this interview because you're my first interview in the athletics realm, um, especially college sports right now. It's a lot of what I read about, NIL, the transfer portal, all of those things. And so I'm sure you're entrenched in all of that. And how is that? How do you portray? I mean, as the athletic director, you're not only leading yourself, you're leading a team of other associate athletic directors, you're leading a team of all your coaches throughout every sport, and then ultimately that boils down to the players and the staff on all of those teams. And so, how do you when you look at the athletic department and you're the leader of the whole athletic department, how do you translate those values and the importance of being a leader to the other leaders on your team, like the coaches and the other athletic directors? How do you best, or how do you, I guess I'm trying to ask, how do you portray that to them? Because they're leaders in their own right as well, leaders of teams. But ultimately, I feel like in the athletic department, they would look to you as their head. And so how do you, as the leader, portray your values, but also allowing them to be their own leaders as well?
Yeah, I don't really make it about me. It's usually about them. So I don't
Mhm.
know. I mean, they know if we have to talk through situations, but usually it's to come up with department values and how we define that. And here we focus on student athlete experience, the fan experience, our 250,000 alums and everybody that we represent for this great university. And then we look at trying to be leaders in the MAC. So we kind of set those values out, but then I give them the flexibility, within those bounds. But, integrity is a steadfast at this university. They have 7 leadership principles that we have to envision and value. And so we take those as a base of how we do everything. And then what we do is we focus on that student athlete experience fan and being leaders in the MAC. And then I just try to support them in, more of a servant style leadership. Like, what do they need? And those are the boundaries, right? Like, if we start getting off the rails with one of those, but it's not because it's mine. I think that's the interesting thing. Like, at universities, you have to be welcome of everybody, right? It doesn't matter what your backgrounds, beliefs, like campuses and higher education are places of thought and engaging everybody. And so I serve everybody. And I, will not usually say, and I'll say, look, I have personal feelings or perspectives. Doesn't matter. I'm in a professional setting where I service you, and that those don't come into play. So I think it really isn't a lot about me and my style. Maybe that's not the right approach. A lot of it's about them and what I can do for them. And I just think, like we said, actions instead of words is usually what they need.
Yeah. No, I love what you brought up, this servant leadership idea. And I wasn't expecting that answer. Like how you said it when I said, how do you portray these values and how do you help develop the leaders on your team? And the first thing you said was, well, it's not about me, it's about them. I think that makes a great leader. And I think as you focus on others and you have that leadership mindset, I think that helps grow teams even way more because they know you have their back, they know you're there for them, rather than like they have to report to this, hard and steadfast, which has its place in its own right. But I love that idea of servant leadership and the ability that a leader has to say, I might be, in charge, I might be the boss per se in a formal role setting, but I'm here to serve you. I have this stewardship for you and to make sure that you're taken care of. I love that idea. Yeah. Well, Amy, I'd love to, we've talked about, I've kind of mentioned a couple of times your career moving through different schools from Georgia, Texas, through the NCAA even, and then at Central Michigan. As you look back over your career, your definition of success as a leader, how have you felt like that has changed throughout the years, as you've moved from school to school and then up now to being the leader at Central Michigan?
I kind of been surprised it hasn't changed a lot. And actually, when I went through the exercise, 20 something years ago, I thought, would it change a lot? Like, and there are things they talk about, crucibles, like major life experiences, death of somebody, divorce, just the major things in life that all of us go through that don't get unscathed. And I've had some crucibles since putting those together, but I've actually been comforted in the fact. But at times I think you always have to look and learn, like, now I have a lot more experience behind me than I had been. But I think some of the values pieces, maybe it's a good thing they don't change. Like, you kind of are who you are and how you're raised. I think it's good to reevaluate them and be able to pivot if you need. I don't think it's going to be rigid. I think it's good to be flexible and reflective. But also, some of these things I think are just, from when I was raised and who I am and those experiences that shaped me that were probably pretty solid. So I do look at it, but it actually always surprises me how much when things get really tough and really crazy, like those things I have confidence in, they're pretty consistent.
Yeah. And this kind of makes me think of another question we talked about earlier. Obviously, this being in sports, being in the sports industry, athletics, also education. I feel like in sports, oftentimes, everybody's watching the scoreboard. Who won the game, who lost the game, who had this many points or touchdowns or whatever it is. And so I feel like it can be easy from an athletic director's point of view to say, how many games did we win? We're successful because of how many games we win, and versus our losses, or how many points or how many All-Americans we have and obviously you want to win. Those are the things you want to win. It's not like you're wanting to lose or you don't want to produce great athletes or you don't want to win national championships. But how do you personally maintain this vision of success, of values, and standing for who you are while still balancing the idea that we want to win and we want to perform as well?
Yeah, I don't think those are separate. I think sometimes following the process is how you get there. And I don't think that's changed, whether it's at Connecticut, Georgia, Texas, the NCAA, or at Central Michigan University, the expectation that you win and you get results is going to be there. I think the values is kind of like how you do things. And so I don't think those are things that are always at conflict. I think some people, different values, like it could be win at all costs, right? Like there's certain places you know you're not a good fit, either way. Like not everybody's built the same and not every experiences. That's why diverse school of thought and backgrounds. And so I just need to know when I go in a place, like, here's who I am and is this a good fit? But I don't think there's any different at Texas, either the leaders you asked me about, like any of the schools I've been at that are, in their own right, highly successful. Like, I think people need to know their values. They need to know who they are. I think you usually end up at the places that fit. And if you're going to have success, you definitely, those all have to align. And if you don't, I think you end up moving on and going somewhere else. And look, people are places and some places change. Being at the same place for 18 years, I saw times where it's definitely probably more true and not, but you being somewhere for 18 years, you kind of look in, the water pools in the same place and, the copiers in the same place. So it kind of is interesting to be able to study an organization and see how it changes. But places are people too. And I don't know that it changes. And I think that's kind of surprised me through the journey, but I think I was lucky, right? Lucky to have good leaders, lucky to have that process like you talked about. I think if I wasn't so fortunate, and look, one of my values I said was continuous learning. I'm in higher education. Like,
yep,
kind of fits, right? It doesn't mean I can't learn from another industry, but in my career, I went from compliance to fundraising. Not a lot of people go, and those are kind of considered polar opposites. Like, I just think there's certain things where you look back and you're like, oh, and I just felt fortunate to be able to, continuously learn and take those values and do the best. And look, none of it's easy, right? Like we all try our best every day to be our best versions of ourselves. So I'm not saying I always hit the mark, but you always try. And then I think the comfort is like, I know what I want to do and what I'm about. And, the rest, even at Texas, like, you get to put the pants on the same way everybody else does, and you get to go work hard. And I think they're the allure of the brand and just being the best. You can start to believe the hype and not do the work. So I think everywhere you have different challenges. I think we're crisis management and problem solving everywhere we are. But look, you mentioned the military, like the best leaders in the world. Like none of it's easy, and some of that you can get locked into. You can believe the hype, and you have to remember every day, like you have to do the work, and you have to do the things when nobody's looking, and you have to stay true to your values. And if you don't, it will come out one way or the other.
Yeah. And I love that you tie the two together. Oftentimes values and performance, they're tied together. And it's funny, I love sports movies, sports books, like I love all of those. And it reminds me of, Coach K's gold medal team and the story of that in the Olympics. And he came in and instilled these values as the leader and ultimately led them to their greatest success. And there's a million stories that you could read in a book or watch a movie where a team grows in value and their success grows as well in terms of wins. And that may not always happen. You may have the greatest value system and you may go winless for a season. It never is perfect, but I feel like oftentimes some of the greatest teams performance-wise have also the greatest values, both the leaders and the players. And so I think that's important. And actually, the model that I've kind of come up with through my experience with the front lines of leadership and interviewing and studying is actually leadership equals people plus process. And the people being the leadership development, the characteristics, the attributes, the people side, the relationship side, and the process side being how do you build a process that's going to perform? And you can't have one without the other. Like ultimately the greatest leadership comes from relationships and people, but also being able to develop good systems and good processes for success. So I 100% agree with you. I think they can be tied together and they're really important. So yeah, thank you.
Sounds like you're built for athletics.
Well, I would love that. I was an athlete all through high school and unfortunately ended up to go just to get my education in college. But no, I love that realm, love that industry. I watch it probably way too much, but no, thank you for that. Well, another question I had, Amy, and I've loved your thoughts so far. Thank you again for being willing to come on and share them so far. But I've got a few more questions for you, if that's all right.
That's great.
Sweet. And this is an idea that I've talked about in other episodes. And kind of the origin of this podcast was to inspire the rising generation, people of my age and younger coming up, to develop those leaders in the rising generation to be the best leaders they can be. And oftentimes we're not necessarily in a leadership role or have a leadership title per se. What would you say to the idea that leadership is more about influence and less about title, and how someone could prepare to be a leader even if they're not necessarily in that leadership position officially?
Yeah, I think leadership is a process and lifelong. And I think I told you some of the things that impacted me from some of the top leaders weren't accepting the trophy and the big wins. It was what they did when nobody was looking, or they kind of lost track that people were looking. Right. So I think it's how you treat anybody. And I'm talking about experiences back when I was a student athlete, like, or you're a GA, or when somebody else is and what they do. It isn't titles. Titles aren't what I think people genuinely get to those positions have probably done that. That's not always true. Like, you have exceptions to every rule, but I think for the most part, it is absolutely true. I mean, look, there's 130, well, there's 133 when I got to this year. Now there's 136 FBS ADs. That's a lot of tests, and nobody just gets there easily, and nobody stays there easily. So when somebody's wanting to get there, like, what you do every day is practicing. And then when you get here, like, there's a lot of adversity. There's still bosses. You can't just make the decisions. So the perception and the reality is, like, I think, it's just find what your values are, do the right things, do what's important when nobody's looking. Because I think when you get to the top, like, everybody's looking. So you better practice it while you're there. And I think I had many leadership opportunities that prepare you for here. It isn't a title. It is what you do and how you do it. Again, back to my mom, like, actions speak louder than words. There's nothing you're going to say. And when you're in these positions, you have to represent the brand and you have to speak. But I don't think it's those things that make it happen. It's really what you do and how you treat people. And like you said, that helps process and how you get to results. But leadership isn't a title. It's really what you do and how you do it with others.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think the greatest leaders understand that sure if you have a title, like titles, and if you're in that formal position, like that deserves respect, for who you are and the opportunity you've been given. But ultimately, it's what you do with it and having the opportunity, as we go back to servant leadership, like, you may have a title, but also you're going to have opportunities well before you have a title to lead and be a leader. And that's because you have an influence on people. And I love this kind of idea of picking leaders. And I'm sure, entrenched and have seen this a lot. The idea of, like, on a sports team, whether it's a basketball team, whatever sport, and all of the athletes picking their captain. Oftentimes, like, that is chosen by the players, and it's the person who they trust the most, who has the greatest influence on the team. And that's not necessarily sometimes I'm sure it's chosen by the coach or the department, whatever. But oftentimes I feel like it comes from the team within. Like, we trust this person. This is who has the greatest influence on us, and that's who we are going to lean to when we need to. And so I love that idea, and it kind of comes back to picking your leader, and it's not about title or anything like that, but really the influence and the stewardship they're going to have over you. So I really like those ideas. Well, one more question I have for you, Amy, and to wrap us up is, and this has helped me learn a lot, and I've actually tried to apply these answers as well as I could in my own life. As I talk to leaders that have much more experience than me, I love to ask them if they were to look back on their younger self, whether that's you at UConn as a player, maybe even younger than that, or at any of the roles before you're in now. If you're to look back, what advice would you give to your younger self about growing into a great leader for yourself?
I think it's always be around good people, like, go places. And that's not, it's not always the titles. I do think some of the, like, I'm talking UConn, Texas, Georgia, right, type places, like, you will find a quality in that quantity of people, those legacies. But you have to be mindful that everywhere, people are people and make mistakes. And so you could be there and find somebody who doesn't have integrity. And what are you going to be and what are you going to do? I think what you're doing today, you'd be surprised. I know once in my interview, when somebody said, well, who are you on a team? And I was like, well, I'm the person that carries the water or gets the water cooler if you need to. But if we have to go in and score the goal and win the game, like, I'll do that. And so I think you'd be surprised that what you are doing every day is preparing you. You are leading. Like, life is hard. There's a lot of life lessons and you're learning and you're shaping, but even the top leaders in athletics, when you talk to any of them, like, they'll pull on life lessons and what they grew up doing. So you're doing it. And just know that what you do and how you show up today is where you'll go and how you're doing that tomorrow. Like there are no red carpets, burn orange carpets, burn gold carpets. Nobody rolls it out for you and just says, hey, do you want this? I actually think the more you fail and the more resilient and the more you get up, the more you actually are prepared for wherever you go. And how, in Texas, sitting next to how hot the chair is, like nobody's going to have an easy go. So you got to be prepared to take a lot of licks and, bumps and bruises. And are you resilient? Do you get up? And life is hard. Nobody's going to get through unscathed. And sometimes people are sitting in these chairs going through some really tough things. And you've got to just do the job and figure it out. And I'm talking about peers, right? To the left and the right. So I think for young people, like this illusion that you get there and you've arrived, it's an illusion. And so just keep doing what you're doing and be around good people and just keep learning and just trying to do your best version of yourself. And maybe something like the True Growth Academy, right? Like if you can go through your own lesson, get clarity on what you are and your values. And there is a time continuum to that. Like some people have a lot more crucibles and experience when they're 12 than some people do when they're 30, right? But I still think knowing for you where your comfort is and what you're about at the point your life can reveal that is probably the best advice. But, just keep getting up. I guess that would be the best advice.
No, I love that advice. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of, Rocky. It's not how hard you can hit, it's how hard you can get hit and keep on going. And I think I love that idea of like fail often, fail fast, fail often, and like that's how you're gonna learn. And I'm really glad you shared that, and I'm gonna take that advice to heart too, because oftentimes I get impatient. It's like I want to be here or I want to make it to this milestone, and I kind of rush it, and I lack that patience sometimes. It's like, oh, if I get there, then I've arrived. Like you said, that illusion of arrival. You probably will probably never arrive, even if you make it to the highest of highs. You'll probably get there and still want to keep growing, and like you said, continuous improvement, continuous learning. But I love that idea of being curious, failing often, failing early, and then learning from it. So thank you for sharing that. And just to wrap up, Amy, thank you so much for being willing to come on the podcast. I've loved the stories you've shared, the examples you gave of great leaders in your life, and then the principles and values that you live by, and they're going to help me be a better leader and hopefully the listeners to be better leaders. So thank you so much for being willing to come on.
Thanks for having me, Jackson. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to stop the record.
Chips.
Yeah, go Chips.
Thank you for spending time with us on the Front Lines of Leadership podcast. Leadership isn't about the position you hold. It's about the responsibility you accept and the people you serve. Take a moment to reflect on one principle from today's conversation that you can apply immediately, at work, at home, or in your community. Small, intentional actions compound into real leadership. Subscribe, share, and join us again as we continue to learn from leaders who show us what it means to lead from the front lines.